Welcome back into the program, the fourth and final hour of today's show. A lot of college football talk. We're about 12 days away from the start of the college football season. We've been kind of bouncing around the country, kind of get some previews of camps around the land, and we're going to go to the Pacific Northwest now. Eugene, Oregon is where Erik Skopil lives, and he covers the Oregon Ducks for Duck Territory. He joins us now on Three-Man Front. Erik, I hope the summer's gone well for you.
Yeah, can't complain. Good to have football back. It was crazy hearing on the advertisement coming in there. 10 days till the start of football season. That blows my mind. I don't know where the summer went.
Oh, it's crazy. Well, let me ask you this: have you gotten used to the fact that you're now covering a team that is in the Big Ten Conference? Has that finally sunk in?
I think so. Just in terms of the fact that I'm no longer paying attention to West Coast teams primarily, and
right.
I'm spending a lot of time looking at teams in like Indiana and Michigan and Maryland. I'm booking travel to go to New Jersey this year. So I think it has, but it's still weird. And it really, I mean, I think we talked about it before. It frankly doesn't make much sense logistically, but here we are booking travel all the way across the country for Pennsylvania and New Jersey for conference football games. But that's the world we live in.
Erik, we were warned last year when we had Texas and Oklahoma coming in the league. Hey, just a big warning, guys, about Texas fans. Who is that fan base for you, or that school for you now that you've been throughout the Big Ten, that you said, you know what, you're absolutely right. This program, this fan base is obnoxious.
That's a good question. It might be Penn State. A little bit.
I can see.
Yeah, I'd say because I think Ohio State and Oregon, like there's definitely probably more animosity, and maybe Ohio State's the answer because that fan base certainly reveled in what happened in Pasadena. I do think there was strangely like a level of respect gained by what happened in Autzen that Oregon was able to pull that off and knock the Buckeyes off. But there was definitely some kind of there's a lot of chirping going on between the Nittany Lions and Ducks leading up to that Big Ten championship game. And certainly with that game front and center this season, I don't think that chatter has really quieted down during the offseason.
Well, one thing's for sure, especially here in the state of Alabama, we are very familiar with Dan Lanning. Obviously, he was in Tuscaloosa. He was over at Georgia. He's done a great job in the Pacific Northwest. And he continues to come to the state of Alabama, Erik, and take some of the best blue chippers out of the state of Alabama to bring up to the Pacific Northwest. Talk to us a little bit about the recruiting prowess of this Oregon team, because this is a national brand, and when you have Nike behind you, that gets a lot of young people's attention.
Yeah, no, it certainly does. And I think the staff composition helps. The fact that they've had on-field success helps. You're right, NIL is certainly not lacking out here. An offer, I think, sometimes to kids from different parts of the country, hey, check out what's going on up here. I think that Oregon is like the university is at least not in like a big metropolitan city. It's a smaller community. I think that offers like maybe for some people kind of a different approach of like, there's not a lot of distractions here. It's just basically football. And I think that's probably similar maybe for some of these kids from the Southeast too. If you're going to look at Alabama or Auburn and some of these cities, you're not living in Atlanta or something. So I do think there's some of that. And you're right. Like the state of Alabama had never been a state Oregon had touched in recruiting. Last couple of cycles have had a lot of success, whether it be with Jaquan McRoy, who's I think since transferred to Arkansas, obviously Naeem Offord this last year. Go back and look at Bo Nix and Tez Johnson, a couple of guys from the state. And then, most recently Tank Jones, the edge rusher, getting him in the fold, one of the better players in that state. I mean, that was a surprise that I think it went that way. Ultimately, it looked like Alabama had the advantage until the last couple of weeks there. But certainly you look at Oregon's roster, it looks a lot more like an SEC roster than it ever has before. And with a coach like Lanning, and you mentioned it, with his history in the SEC, he knows the blueprint, he knows how to operate, and he certainly knows the way to build a staff that can compete. So, recruiting continues to be very, very healthy out here. And I think this year will be one of the years where you can hopefully lean on it and say, hey, there's not a lot of returning vets that didn't hit the portal quite as hard as some schools. They've kind of entered this year saying, we're going to bet on the young players we've recruited the last couple of cycles, and we'll see what the season presents. Because, I mean, honestly, if they do falter and it's a tough season, it'll be somewhat of an indictment on that choice to say, hey, we're not going to go out there and pull in all these. And they certainly had some transfers they added, but we're not going to go out there and add all these transfers. We're going to lean on some young guys.
Evan Stewart, talented wide receiver, going down with the injury. Normally you say it's one player, but we saw it firsthand here in the SEC. You guys saw it last year in Eugene, but how much does that loss potentially mean to this Oregon team?
It's a really significant loss. I mean, not just because he's really talented, and as you said, if you've watched Evan Stewart play, you've seen the highs. I mean, last year, I think like 80% of his production was in 4 games, but it was like 4 of their biggest wins of the season. You know, it was Boise State and Ohio State games mixed in there. He had a big performance late in the year against Washington. So, you know, you look at the way Evan performed a year ago. You saw some of the flashes, but it's also the fact that he was kind of their only proven veteran returning wide receiver. You know, you look at the roster; they've got a couple of guys who are kind of fill-in starters, or maybe like the 4th or 5th guy. Well, those guys are now being asked to be kind of the veteran presences in the room. I'm not sure the expectations those guys are going to be the lead receivers because they have a bunch of young players. DeCorian Moore, the 5-star number 1 receiver in the country from the Dallas-Fort Worth area that they just landed, and he's on the team this year. I think the expectation he's going to be very prominently involved, but they do lack those kind of veteran proven players in this past game. And I think it creates sort of an interesting dynamic here. And Will Stein, the offensive coordinator, has already come out and said, hey, we may lean on our tight ends and running backs a little bit more than we're used to doing. And so they've got one of the better tight ends in the country in Kenyon Sadiq. I think he's going to be maybe has a case to lead the team in receiving. You know, that's strangely become kind of a, a decade ago, it'd be crazy if you had a tight end leading your team in receiving. You look around the country, and whether it was Brock Bowers at Georgia or, Colston Loveland at Michigan, Tyler Warren at Penn State, like it's become sort of I don't want to say the norm, but not that unusual to have a tight end kind of take over, and lead the way. Sadiq might be that kind of a player for them this year. And in the run game, where, which will be interesting to see. I think that was one of the criticisms of last year's offense was, they had a 51-49 pass to run split. They threw the ball more than they ran it. Is that going to be something you can rely on without Evan Stewart with a bunch of young receivers, but also, and I'm sure you want to talk about it a little bit, with potentially a first-time starter, whether it be a Dante Moore or an Austin Novosad?
Yeah, so where does that stand in regards to the way fall camp has lined up so far in regards to the quarterback position?
Yeah, they're so tight-lipped, and they've closed practice this year, unfortunately, so I don't have much reporting in terms of what I've seen. The expectation remains it'll be Dante Moore, but they've been very careful to, you look around the country, schools are now, Alabama just announced a quarterback, a couple of days ago, starter.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There are schools across the country making announcements. They're not even seemingly, ready to talk about the competition more than to say that both guys have looked good. The scrimmage had some ups and downs. They're pretty guarded information there. Ultimately, as I said earlier, Dante Moore will probably be the starter. I'd bet pretty good money on that. Not saying to go out there and bet it if that's on. I'm not even sure if that's on the books. Probably
right.
Isn't. But my point is, I think he's going to be the guy. It's just an interesting camp where there's not been a whole lot of discussion on what that competition actually looks like, and they like it that way. And we'll find out probably on August 30th against Montana State, one way or the other. But Dante Moore is the expected starting quarterback, and talking to people behind the scenes, sounds like he's had a really strong camp and is somebody that the staff feels really good about. They just aren't necessarily ready to say that publicly, I guess.
Erik Skopil is joining us here on Three Man Front from Duck Territory as we're previewing the Oregon Ducks, a team that many people have pegged to win the national championship. Let me ask you about another familiar name in our neck of the woods, and that's Tosh Lupoi, who is the defensive coordinator for Dan Lanning. The defensive line for the Ducks, they lost an All-American, I think 3 draft picks, part of the first 100 draft picks this year in the NFL draft. Talk to us about the defensive side of the ball and what Lupoi has coming back.
Well, the answer is not a whole lot. 3 starters back on the defense and 3 key players, leading tackler Bryce Betcher, who's a former walk-on who's become, I think, kind of the heart and soul of the team, a local kid, grew up in Eugene. Not very often you see a Eugene kid actually playing for the local school, so that's kind of a fun development. He's one of the returners. And then 2 edge rushers, Mateo Uiagalelei, who I think has a chance to be an All-American this year, and Tatum Tuioti, who's probably a little overlooked for what he's provided as last couple of years as a starter and as one of the team's better pass rushers. But that's pretty much it in terms of returning contributors. A couple other guys that played a little bit last year. The secondary is going to be brand new. I think that's one of the bigger question marks kind of surrounding camp is like, They have to replace all 5 starters back there, including 2 corners that were really high-end players a year ago. The corners on the roster are primarily young players. I mentioned Naeem Offord earlier. Like, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Like, you could put on an Oregon game in mid-September that you see him out there with like the first team defense playing. Like, I think that's fully in the realm of possibility. So I think the defense, the question is like, both on the defensive line and the secondary, I kind of mentioned it earlier, like, how does that recruiting pay off? Like, what's the payoff for stacking top 5, top 10 classes the last 3 or 4 years? Because they've gone into this and said, we're doubling down. We're betting on the recruiting we've done and the young talent, a lot of which is unproven. So that's kind of the story for that defense. I think there's a chance that they're bigger and more athletic than they even were last year up front on that defensive line. They've got a bunch of 320, 330 guys that I think are pretty interchangeable that can play a couple of different places up front. But these guys haven't played major college football, really, at least not in these kind of roles. So I think the question there, and it's kind of a question team wide, is, they bet on, we built the roster with a lot of young, talented players. Well, now we find out if that was a wise bet or not, because there aren't a lot of veterans returning on this team. We take Evan Stewart out of the mix. It's just 4 returners there's one offensive starter back. If you take Evan Stewart out of the picture, it's a brand new football team. It's a very talented football team. And for Tosh and Will Stein, the coordinators on this coaching staff, it's a question of, can they get everybody ready? And frankly, what do the growing pains look like? I wouldn't be surprised if the month of September, there's some moments where you go, that does not look like the Oregon football we're used to seeing.
Erik, the steal of the transfer portal, and this is a guy who played his high school ball at Huffman here locally outside of Birmingham, but also at Tulane, got to see him firsthand last year. Mekhi Hughes, running back. I think that this guy could be the steal of the portal. Pat raves about him. We rave about him. A lot of people, though, nationally, they don't know who Mekhi Hughes is. I think that changes this year in Eugene.
I do too. And I mentioned it earlier. I don't think it was by mistake that Will Stein kind of noted, hey, we might be down some receiver talent, whether it be injuries or just players going to the draft the last couple of years. You might have to rely on some other positions, and he brings up running back because they've got a stable of guys, whether it be a Mekhi Hughes or a Noah Whittington, who is entering his 6th year of college football. He's been at Oregon for 4 of those years. And then some of these younger guys that you talk to people, it sounds like they're really excited by. I think Hughes most likely will be the lead running back. I don't even know if most likely needs to be attached. He will be. He probably has a chance to hit that 1,000 yards again, but I think it's a rush attack that kind of similar to what we've seen from staying in the Big Ten, I guess, Ohio State, Penn State the last couple of years where they rotate quite a bit. Like, I wouldn't be surprised, though, if a couple of these other younger backs are involved a lot and incorporated for a run attack that could carry an offense early on in the season, especially with some younger players in the pass offense. I think that's going to be pretty interesting to follow. And Hughes in particular is, watching him in the spring game, and frankly, that's the only chance I've had to see him in an Oregon uniform, unfortunately. Just so explosive, always falls forward, loves contact. I think he's put on about 10 pounds of weight this offseason. And just speaking with him about a week or 2 ago at Oregon Football Media Day, he looks the part. So it looks like an SEC running back playing in the Big Ten. We'll see how that combination works.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, like Landrum said, I was able to cover him in high school, and he didn't have much of an offensive line, but, man, he could, whether it's between the guards or get to the outside, he was a special player. So there's no doubt that Oregon is going to get the best out of him. So I'm sitting here looking at Oregon's schedule, and in regards to where they have to go, they got to go to Happy Valley. They got to go to Iowa. But outside of that, I know the final game of the season in Seattle, but just talk about their schedule because, again, this is from an SEC's perspective. I'm sitting here looking at it. It looks extremely manageable for this Oregon football team this year. Tell me if I'm right or wrong.
I think you're right. And I think that's sort of the consensus out here, too, is you look at it, and Oregon was fortunate in that they play Penn State. That's going to be a very difficult game, end of September. That could be the only loss they take in regular season play. And in fact, they'll probably be close to double-digit favorites, depending on how the season plays out, against everybody else. Indiana coming off the bye week after Penn State, that's a home game. I think the Hoosiers are probably a little more talented than people want to give them credit for. I was pleasantly surprised based upon the research I did this offseason with what they bring back, and then also kind of surprised that they're ranked in the top 20 in the AP poll. that might be like the second best team they play full stop on the regular season. And that's kind of in the middle there, coming off a bye week. So, they get through that. The month of November gets a little testy just because you do have that trip to Iowa. You do have the 2 West Coast rivalry games with USC and Washington to end the regular season. But, Oregon could be a team where they're still kind of finding themselves and figuring themselves out, learning who they are, midway through October into November, while only having 1 loss or being maybe undefeated if they can pull the upset in Happy Valley. So, yeah, it's a weird season to project, because I did my season predictions on the win loss record, excuse me, and I had them at 11-1. Not that I think necessarily this is a 11-win team based upon all these questions we have on the roster, but it was really hard for me picking through the schedule to find a game and pinpoint, I think that's going to be a loss. There's certainly games they could lose, but I think, like you said, you look at the schedule and you work your way down it and you go, I have a hard time going, that's a capital, let's put it in ink loss, aside from maybe that Penn State game. And so if you're Oregon, this could be a season where if they find their footing and they kind of hit their full stride in November and they finish 11-1 in regular season play, they could be a really dangerous outcome college football playoff time, even though maybe early on in the season, people are looking around kind of going like, I don't know if this Oregon team's what we thought they'd be.
That is Erik Skopil. You can follow his work at Duck Territory. Erik, always great to catch up with you. Should be an exciting year once again for Oregon in the Big Ten and the college football playoff. Hopefully we can stay in touch and have fun next week as we get everything kicked off.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, keep me posted. Love to come back on.
All right, sounds good. That is Erik Skopil joining us on the Higginbotham Hotline. All of our guests join us on the Higginbotham Hotline. You deserve solutions that are built for you. Higginbotham is your one-source solution for insurance, financial, and HR services.
Well, our friends at Prize Picks, that's the best place to win cash while watching sports. Who doesn't love doing that? Join millions of users. You can sign up today. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. Turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. It's really easy. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code WJOX. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even have to win. That's code WJOX. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. But it's not just football, the professional and the college ranks, which you will have at your disposal this season, but also professional baseball, all kinds of different sports. But that's where we are going tonight. And I got a couple of goblin bets. That means that the bets are easier to win, or the projections are easier to win, I should say, but the payouts are lower. We'll go baseball tonight. Juan Soto and his Mets taking on the Braves. Hits, runs batted in. Combine those. All he has to do is get one of any of those. He's done that in 6 out of the last 7 games. Aaron Judge for Conrad's New York Yankees. Same thing. All he has to do is get 1 run. Score 1 run.
Easy.
1 hit. Knock a run in. That's all you got to do. He's done that in 5 of his 6 last games.
Come on, Aaron.
All right. So we're going to go with both of those guys. They go more on those projections. We're a winner. You can be a winner too. Prize Picks, once again, promo code WJOX. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
When we come back on 3-Man Front, we'll kind of unpack what Erik Skopil was talking about. Oregon, if you just look at their schedule, man, wow, it is manageable. And they went undefeated during the regular season last year. Just, man, I know they're kind of reloading on the defensive side. New quarterback, but we'll kind of discuss that and where the pecking order is in the Big Ten. That's next on 3-Man Front.